Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to mention a subject that comes up a lot in my circles. And it's not because anyone else brings it up, it's because they quote from these things. And for me, it's a little frumpy. And it has to do with the process of sort of inventing prophets. What is the definition of a prophet? Someone who makes a prediction that comes true. Okay. What would that mean if a prophet really existed? It means we would be living in a world that is much different than the one that is sold to us, right? There's magic, basically. Who doesn't want to believe in magic, man? Now, I think we can clearly say that there are people that just simply know when they look at something where it's going. You could say that a lot of the politicians in various countries, especially America, as I know it, they were prophets when they looked at the fact that the Constitution got raped in 1913 with the falsely ratified 16th Amendment, which launched a thug organization to steal your wages, which are your property. That's one example. And politicians, said stuff like, well, you got a republic if you can keep it. And that move in 1913 was what they're talking about. You're going to lose it because you're going to get stupid. All the issues that made America at the very beginning. Well, it always creeps back, and they just knew history. Imagine you take a robber baron who made Magna Carta, and about 25 years after they got it passed, when King John's son kept coming after him, raising taxes and saying, you get rid of that, I'll get rid of these taxes. That's like 1000 AD. And then you bring him to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. They're going to be looking around going, okay, guys, brace yourself. It's coming. But, we got all kinds of prophets. We got these prophets in the Bible. We have renegade prophets like Nostradamus. Got these sort of one-offs in the 20th and 21st century. Guys who predict earthquakes every single day, and lo and behold, one of those days they're a genius. I got a buddy of mine who's Christian, and instead of just being Christian, instead of just reading the New Testament and just getting out of it what you get out of it, and reading the Old Testament and getting out of it what you get out of it, and making your decision if whether or not the new law canceled the old law, you have to make all those decisions yourself. No one can force that into your brain. Instead of just doing that, he's worried. He's worried this isn't true. And you can always tell when a Christian's worried, desperately worried that what they believe is not true. And I say, believe it. If it feels good to your soul and it makes you a good person, just believe it. Don't worry about it. But they'll get the Bible out and they'll say, well, the Bible says, and the Bible says, and it's always a prophet model. It says that something in our time is going to have happened, or is going to happen, and you can, as long as you can see it coming, see, I told you. And I've said this stuff on the show with Revelations. Revelations, written by a different John, supposedly, is making all kinds of predictions. And man, is it esoteric as can be. The reason why I think these individuals have such a habitual habit of traveling to new locations to meet new people and then telling them that, look right here, and then look right here, is just fear. I know I just repeated myself, but I just want to make that clear. But now let's think about it. Making a prophet. Now let's say that I am a very winded Francis Bacon kind of character. Meaning I can speak in allegory, I can speak in metaphor, and I can speak it so beautifully. I don't think anyone was recorded in history as being more talented than that guy, having written the 2 books that have been translated the most. All the works of Shakespeare and the King James Bible. Now, obviously, there were a lot of texts and scrolls and all kinds of stuff before the 1613 Bible came out. But when it goes through the eye of a particular person's brain, there is no way that it doesn't get the tone of that person. If I took one of my scripts, one of my screenplays, and I gave it to some other screenplay writer, or gave it to Tarantino or someone who's very stylistic, you can feel his style. And if he were to reinterpret my film, and he had one constraint, which he wouldn't agree to, but he had to keep all the scenes. He had to still get from point A to point B in all the scenes. He can redo the dialogue however he wants. He can even mess with the action in the scene. He's just got to make sure that when a person walks in the front door and leaves out the back door in the end of the scene, that particular event occurs. You know it's going to read different. So if anyone minimizes, even though it's heavily documented that Francis Bacon was the only person to reign over the King James Bible, and when the Royal Academy was asked, hey, what were the sources that he used to create this? And they refused. I should tell you something. There's two ways that you can make a profit pretty darn quick. I mean, Christ. Bill Gates is a fucking prophet, right? He's conducting what is called, in most languages, a threat. He is chum buddies with the people that want to reset this planet to make it as ugly as he is, right? Just his soul is just wretched. Well, if you know what's going to happen because you're going to do it, because you're in a meeting where they're talking about the schedule for the whole thing, all the science is worked out, all the methodologies are worked out, and he goes out and pretends to just have a hunch, I think maybe smallpox is going to be out there, then he looks like a prophet to some abject morons in the world. We're more hip to it, right? Okay. What are the other kind of prophets we can have that are simply made out of history? Well, now imagine, it's just fascinating that stories, especially in the Old Testament, and you have to understand, I am not disrespecting the Bible whatsoever. It is a masterpiece of masterpieces. I mean, it's a bunch of the most brilliant stories told by man. Whether or not it affects you or calls to you is up to you and where you are in your life, right? King Solomon might be the stage you're in. You might be more like the leper getting healed by Jesus. It just depends on what era in life you're in as to what part of that Bible really hits you hard, right? That's the beauty of it. But to have a story where someone tells you what someone said 4,000 years ago is sort of incredibly laughable, isn't it? I mean, let's just be honest. Who was the journalist in the Garden of Eden writing down all these events? Who in the book is even recorded as being the one to tell the story so that it gets passed down in oral text? There's no mention of any sort of side writer. Like the guy in Unforgiven, the journalist that kept following around the Duke of Death, right? Richard Harris. So the very foundation of many of these events has to be questioned just at face value. I mean, they will tell you what King Solomon said at dinner. I mean, it's like, it's all completely documented. It's supposed to be flawless, but it wasn't documented for a very long time in all kinds of different forms, So if you have texts that are very generic and they make predictions of any kind from a long time ago, you have this translation of words, right? Well, what word are you hearing? What if it said something like, the wolf will come, the moon will eclipse for 3 days straight. It'll be full for 3 days straight, and the sun will do a little burpee thing for 2 days. And when that happens, all the chain of events locks together, and then this other thing is going to occur. Well, there's a lot of astrological things that happen with the moon, let's just say, regardless of what it is and where it is and who put it there. And they're little anomalies, right? Like, I didn't know that there was a prime number sequence where you can get 4 prime numbers in a row. I didn't know that was possible. Apparently it is. There's a lot of encryption codes based on it. The wheel at Coral Castle is based on that. Quadratic prime numbers, okay? When you have that little thing up your sleeve, what's interesting is you can throw that in a story. Now, with quadratic numbers, you won't necessarily be sitting around going, hey, I was playing with my prime number generator and that's not going to happen. But everyone sees the moon. And what are we doing? Are we really looking up at the moon every single day because that's the only show in town, because there is no television, there's no electricity, there isn't even a printing press? So just kind of chilling out after a day on your porch with your goats and looking up at the sky and just kind of remembering, oh, honey, man, that looks full, don't it? Wasn't it full yesterday? And then third day, it does the same exact thing. And it becomes this little treasure trove that you've got, this little anomaly that that probably other people didn't notice. Cool. Nothing wrong with that. But now, as you're trying to come up with more romantic, magical triggers for events to occur, you can attach these other magical, rare things that occur. The blood moon. Again, I took astronomy for a very long time, aced it, and I don't remember anyone mentioning the blood moon until the 21st century. Did I just miss it? I mean, my God, I saw Halley's Comet when I was a kid. I saw Hale-Bopp Comet. Meteor showers on particular days, and I mean, I've been involved with tons of little events, and no one ever said, "What you got to see is the blood moon." Oh, really? Oh, when's that happen? Never heard it. But now it's this thing. We know of stories back in the past when eclipses would occur. Certain dudes knew the mathematics of where on Earth it was going to occur. However they figured that out is actually pretty damn amazing, right? But they would go to kingdoms and they would threaten kings and lords and bishops and all kinds of these institutions. And they would say, if you don't give me this amount of money, I'm going to make the moon go away and it's never coming back. Or the sun go away, it's never going to come back. They don't know that there's maybe even the dudes are figuring this out. Maybe they don't even know that the moon was blocking it. And so, of course, they tell him to pound sand. He sits and waits and whistles and sits with his minstrels. And here it goes. And then, of course, the dude stands up, and he's probably in some sorcerer garb, and he's chanting just the absolute prayer of death on this guy's kingdom. And this dude rushes down a chest of gold. Take it back, take it back. And, of course, he knows it's just going to roll back into existence. And again, according to my astronomy teacher back in high school, he said that every 27 years you can stand in one place on planet Earth and you'll get 2 full solar eclipses, perfect solar eclipses. It takes 27 years. So if you know it's not going to come back to that kingdom for 27 years, the hoax is going to hold on for a really long time. I mean, it's theoretical that a king could preside over a kingdom for 27 years and experience both of them. But then the guy who did it's probably dead too. I mean, it's just like, who knows? But when you write in a book a bunch of things and you have a romantic formula, there's an archetype to it. You can either just make the prediction, like Nostradamus, or you can link it to certain events in history. And then, guess what can happen? Other people can read it who are very powerful. And in reading it, they can have a lot of fun creating events of chaos to manipulate the masses. And as long as this text goes on and on and on for a while, they might just have had the mechanism in place before they published this book in 1613 in the first place. I mean, that's not exactly a long time ago. It's a mechanism. We're worried about all these Simpsons episodes that seem to predict the future. Well, there's 2 ways that works, right? I don't think anyone looks at the Simpsons and says, oh, hey, some animators, some writers in Hollywood are actually looking into some Project Looking Glass time machine and seeing the future and then drawing it into cartoons. They're potentially just so high up in the control structure that they know what the plans are for the next 50 years, or they can get access to it, or someone feeds it to them. But the other thing, too, with like South Park and The Simpsons, you've got a show that's been going on forever. Simpsons is on 31 years now? South Park starts kind of erroneously in 97 with George Clooney's original project of Jesus versus Santa Claus, where he was giving it as a Christmas gift to some friends. And then, of course, it blows up online, which is amazing because online barely had any bandwidth at the time. I remember a dude, I was in a startup. We had this really quirky genius kid. And he would do all the voices, and he just played it. And honestly, we couldn't get enough of it. It was nuts. It was at the point where they made him stop playing it and made him stop doing Cartman. Okay, so that show's been going 22 years or so, right? And think about how fast-paced those cartoons are. I mean, it's like, thing happens, short attention span, boom, thing happens. 31 years? 22 years? Yeah, you're gonna probably cover so many events that could possibly occur in time that you're gonna look like a prophet. Now, Trump coming down the escalator as the president of the United States, that's pretty clever, right? Happened a while back. Now, that's his hotel, right? And it's not the first time he went down those stairs. So if you're going to tell a story about that guy becoming president and you're imagineering where he would travel as a result of that appointment or even announcement, well, it's like that's his hotel. It's one of his famous staircase escalators dipped in gold. It's not exactly mind-blowing, right? When I pulled apart the Illuminati card set at the first of this season, some of that looks amazing and some of it doesn't. But if they are looking at a book that says, oh gosh, we need to make some of this stuff come true, we got this to work with, they could just pick right out of a book and make it happen. 100%. The other one is that there are some fudging going on. Remember the Mayan calendar, which said we were going to end the world in 2012, December. And all the Mayan people in South America are like, well, you're completely misinterpreting these dates. If there's even a date here, it's in the 4300s. Relax. What's amazing is that the notion that a society that is pretty much vaporized off the surface of the planet, minus the genome that's now been mixed with everything on Earth, it disappeared, but it had such powers that they could accurately predict the ending of the world. We want to be entertained on one level. And I'm not saying don't be entertained. It's fun to talk about things that maybe don't exist at all. Time travel, Bigfoot, the end of the world being predicted by someone. The problem that this turns into is that, one, a person who's very, very into this sort of prediction living stops living their life because they start suspending their progress in lieu of these prophecies coming true. They're waiting and waiting and waiting, and nothing's going to happen. And even if it did happen, it doesn't mean it's a prophecy. It just means that someone picked up on that story, and that subject matter is now coming back around. One of the ones I mention a lot is the passage in the Revelations, which talks about a one world currency. We often talk about the mark of the beast. What's funny about the mark of the beast is that you've got institutions where you don't mind being marked. You're actually proud of it. You went to a concert that was really cool and you got your hand marked. You get to prove you're over 21, or you got the VIP area, especially a VIP mark on your hand. And so the next day, for the duration of that ink on the back of your hand, you're showing it to all of your friends because you're proud. It's totally cool. And then you go to Disneyland, and they have a policy to give you this invisible sort of infrared ink on your right palm, or your right back of your hand. And if you ask them to put it on the left, they won't do it. Part of that's a policy of fraud. They want to make sure that people aren't doing this illegally, and they figure, well, if we restrict it to one out of two hands and some people start showing up with a left-handed mark, we know that they have somehow rubbed fresh ink on someone else's palm, back of their hand, etc. And then we get all defensive. Institutions, just areas where you don't want to have any disturbance to your being. Now, most nightclubs went to the plastic bands on your wrist, which are really tight, and you can't just rub your hand against someone else's hand because, no matter how much they put a stamp on your hand, if you spill water on it or whatever, wash your hands in the bathroom, it's going to start distorting a little bit, and they can't quite throw you out just because of that, right? But it's advanced, hasn't it? It has to do with microchipping you, putting something in the web of your hand. And just to reiterate, even 10 years ago, they were saying that if you got this microchip in the web of your hand, you could walk into clubs without waiting in line. You got all this VIP treatment. And then everyone who got that shit in their hand developed a localized cancer because it's got electromagnetic waves that come off of it every single time it's scanned, every single time it's by anything else that's inductive. It's going to reflect those electrons into your flesh, and it's going to rip apart your chromosomes. That's your DNA and your protein patterns. Okay. That's a different game, isn't it? But one world currency, let's think about this. This book, which, again, there's not a single book that we find for 360 years about anything that happened in the time of Christ, despite anything you were told. All of the, 125 scripts, books, tablets that we have found since 0 AD up to 360 AD, there's no mention of this Jesus guy anywhere in the territory. So that book was not written back in Christ's time. It's a very esoteric thing. Can you imagine reading the original text of the Revelations and someone saying, oh yeah, this needs to go in the Bible? Not just a little side addendum book that you can buy if you want to, and then drop a bunch of acid and have a little guide to help you lose your mind. Nope, it goes in the official book. As if Jesus, came, went, and didn't mention any of this very important other content. But one world currency was one that I hung on to for a while. And in my mind, it was like, oh my God, that's amazing that someone could have predicted such a thing. Until I learned about the first time this book was actually printed. 400 years ago. That's right around the corner. We don't know exactly how far back the money changers go. Again, there's that passage in the Bible about Jesus turning over the money changers in the temple. And that would sort of mark that inside the landmark of time back 2,000 years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if it existed 2,000 years ago. And again, what's a money changer? Just in case you're brand new to the show, well, that means that someone is holding gold bullion or any type of other valuable metals or gems, and they are issuing paper certificates against what they have in reserve, and realizing that nobody wants to carry around gold, one, because they can be robbed, but two, because it's kind of heavy and bulky. You can actually issue more units of paper against this stuff, and you don't really have it to back it up, which is where fractional reserve banking came. For every unit of gold that you have in your reserves, you can issue 9 times over that amount, equaling 10. So 1's legit, 9 are fake. 9 cannot be actually redeemed if everyone came in at the same time. Putting 90% of the value of money out there being completely worthless. But it still worked, which is why I told you the other day, if you didn't have a concept for the unit count of money, we could just be passing around monopoly money all day. As long as that's what we're willing to pass around. We could pass around beads, furs, whatever. It's unit calorie of energy spent doing something has a value. We can all agree on what the value is. But now, has the world ever had a single currency? Well, the only way to possibly say yes would be to ask a region that doesn't have contact with another region. So let's just say Egypt, for whatever reason, of whatever stage they might have had over perhaps 100,000 years, they weren't really interacting with anyone else, despite the revised history that's out there. And so they are sort of quarantined into an area. Rome could definitely just forget about all their currencies when they were in power. They had a one world currency, and it was nice. And so when things got fractured, like the money of Babylon, okay, when it got fractured into a bunch of different currencies, well, you definitely have folks that can gain the system. Again, all the ambassadors of the world, their children. I was very close to a guy who was handling their money. He said they just print money. They use the currency exchange. They know exactly when the yen's going up and down, the dollar, the whatever. And this is before the euro existed. It just hadn't completely taken over Europe. But they're just there at the right time, and they just shuffle their cash around, and they make a ton of money. It's not inexhaustible like the Sultan of Brunei's sons, but it's good enough to cover anything that they need, right? What I think is interesting is sort of an overtone of this entire subject matter is the following. We want to believe in magic. We do. And there's different kinds of magic. There are David Blaine moments when you're like, oh my God, is this guy a demon? Like, what is this guy? So many of his tricks are just unexplained. But again, I know people reaching through car windows to grab their keys and they pull their arms back through a piece of newspaper and the window's completely solid again. That looks like magic to me. But a bunch of people can do it. I've even seen it explained, and it doesn't explain the 80% of the, in fact, 90% of the examples that I've seen. It was a whole different set of circumstances, the masked guy that tried to give it away. But any of you have ever watched your child come out of your wife, or you're the wife and you saw it come out of your body, and this amazing being looks up at you, that's magic. That's the real stuff, man. When you look into someone else's eyes and you realize that both of you are in the same frequency of absolutely adoring each other, that's magic. And I think what's sort of a sad epitaph is that as we endorse all of these sort of Hollywood methodologies of believing in magic, and it starts to be, Chris Angel, where 99% of his crowd is his staff, oohing and awing, where one person's having a groupthink moment, it starts to usurp the true magic of the world. But we're ingesting content now like crazy, aren't we? The very spectrum of our emotion in terms of being happy, sad, angry, whatever, is just from 0 to 1,000%, back to 0, back to 1,000%. It's just constant. It is truly like taking an hallucinogenic in your mind. And I just think, for me personally, having dropped acid, seeing people on Twitter, going for these sort of endorphin rush moments of hatred and then looking over at someone else, well, acid's bad, and then they come back to this thing. It's like, oh my gosh, you are desperately trying to create the same exact illusion in your mind, but you're calling yours real, and it's full of nothing but satanic rituals of hating other human beings, but you want to virtue signal online you're this big Christian because you're worried. Meanwhile, I'm lying in the backyard looking at geometric shapes in the sky, not hurting a soul, but I'm the bad guy. Now, there are some moments where, like Nostradamus predicting Hitler, obviously it was like Hilter, right? It was a different spelling, but when you can anagram the thing into Hitler, it's pretty good. But talking about future leaders in general would not have mystified anyone. It's the anagram of the name that he wrote down that is the thing that they try to spin up. But there's a lot of text out there that contradict a lot of that interpretation. We saw that first on television, and like Sci-Fi Channel or History's Mysteries or something, it was very romanticized. And if you've ever sat in a room with producers that are trying to create a spin, aka an angle on something, you will start to throw up about everything you thought was true in this world. Again, the fact that Stonehenge was moved down the street and retrofitted into a new location, that was never announced to Americans, because by the time we were in 1980, Leonard Nimoy had already done a show that forged that into the ground as to where it was. There was no movement of it, no reconstruction of it. It's not a big deal that they did that. It's not fake just because you move it and then you fix it. Now, druids showing up and doing their stupid routines on it is silly as hell, but whatever. You can't stop crazy, can you? Just as a slight digression, I don't know if you guys have seen there's a YouTube video of a woman out there who thinks she's a Teenage Ninja Turtle, and I'm sure she's not alone, but could you imagine being the artist who created that character? The people that pushed that show forward and got all the animation done, and then they watch that video and they're like, oh my God, this was just a cartoon character, lady. We just made this, you're not hurting anybody, I guess, but are you living the life that you would have lived had I not made this cartoon? And the thing is if they hadn't made the cartoon, would she be a horse? What's the deal? But that's how desperate we are at times to escape reality at such a young age that I'm assuming that someone who thinks that they're a Teenage Ninja Turtle, they must have latched onto the franchise at a very early age. And I don't know if this person's mentally disabled. I don't get that vibe from my memory of watching the video. But it wasn't like she woke up yesterday and then said, "Oh gosh, I'm gonna do this all of a sudden." The cartoon came on television. She most likely watched it. It touched her heart in a very beautiful way, and she wanted to be a superhero. There's that guy in Chicago who dresses up like a superhero, and part of me is kind of like, "Do it, bro. It's great." You know, he's like the Guardian Angel guys from New York. He just decides to wear an outfit. That's all. I just get really tired of people using fiction to forge truth. Well, you know, this is what it says there, and there's no real ironclad proof of the source. The thing is if you really boil it down, let's just say you're one of those people and you're hearing my voice and you're like, F you, bro. The thing is this, I'm willing to bet that with just an average intelligence that you're going to be able to inspire the beauty in the world that you want to exist in the world without bringing a book into the equation and saying, look at my comic book. It says, and look at what's going on in the world right now. It says this is true. It told me that it is true. Okay. I don't think you need it. I think you can go ahead and just be logical with another human being. Don't you? There's a whole group of people in society that research nothing and know everything, and it's a very frustrating thing to see online. And that's why these Fauci guys, these Dr. Fauci guys are out there. They are there to provide a platform for people to be utterly lazy and to claim expertise. Well, what's the difference between Dr. Fauci and pulling out your book of choice and simply going, see right there it says, and so you got to do this? Yeah, no one has to prove anything. That's the thing. You don't have to prove the coof is real. You don't have to isolate it in a laboratory. Apparently you can send an email and they make a shot out of it in 2 seconds. Yeah, because that's the way medicine works, right? Oh, I just got a soup can with a string on it, and then I was making a particle accelerator because they just sent me the recipe. Everyone seems to be scared of reality. And it is a daunting thing to try and wrap your mind around reality these days. It is like, what's real? Everyone's lying constantly to get their ways, all these agendas coming in. And, obviously the best peace of mind you can give yourself is shutting off the TV. And my buddy, who's very religious, he claimed to me, he goes, I haven't been watching any television and I've turned off all my social media. He goes, I didn't just turn it off, I had it canceled. And so he celebrates that accolade from me. I'm like, that's great, dude. That's awesome. But then the next thing is, let me tell you what's, in the Bible. And again, there's nothing about what his end product has nothing to do with those passages if he just paid attention. Was he trying to convince me to be good? He knows I'm good. Is he, a lot of people will just keep worrying about this end time thing. And we've done that episode, where every generation thinks when there's horrible suffering, the end times are right around the corner. If Native Americans had some sort of belief of end times, which I don't believe they do, but here comes Europe just massacring them and then claiming it was the flu. Shameful. But just massacring them, if they thought they had a God or a creator, what is it? It was like Geronimo or one of those dudes. It's one of the saddest passages is he says, God must love the white man more than us, for he is allowing this being to be victorious over us categorically, That's a sad moment if you could just put yourself empathetically in that person's mind that they must believe it to utter those words and to die thinking you're some sort of inferior being when you're not. Yeah, realities could be a bitch sometimes, How do you decipher it? We play video games now where we can actually see things from afar. And it gives you the ability to be a god in these environments, right? And as silly as it might sound, it gives you a chance to sort of check yourself. I thought it was always strange, and interesting, like games like Fallout 4, and there's a bunch of games like this. Okay, I think it was Lionsgate. Is that the one in England? They make these games where you're a god or you're a character, and you have this choice to be lawful good or unlawful bad. All the dialogue options that you have, you can be really rancid. You could pull out a gun as long as you can kill everybody in the room. You can do it. They'll let you do it. You can steal, and people will think bad of you, especially in Fallout 4. If you're with a human and you steal something, it'll say that your human companion lost respect for you. But people could just OD on that, and I think some probably small group of people do it. Now, most of the games actually are configured, and this is important to our example here, in my opinion. You do find out that when you go dark, things fall apart extremely quickly. You're losing all your quests because you're killing your quest givers. So there's sort of an unwritten design principle that you're supposed to be good, because without being good, you don't get the experience. And I think that's very, very interesting as you overlay it onto any reality. I'm getting this question a lot from people in the last year when they're realizing that this regimen they want you to consume is probably going to kill you. It's going to sterilize your kids if it doesn't kill them right away. So that means massive depopulation. And so they ask me, well, why would they want to do that? And it blows my mind that they have been under a rock for so long. The concept of the elite of the world reducing world population down doesn't have a single circuit towards a piece of information on the hard drive of life that is logical. And a part of me just thinks it is one of these situations where it's, in their mind, they're always going to extremes. The feeble mind uses extremes, one, to win arguments, but two, it's just sort of a remedial way of looking at information. So in their brain, they're going, everybody else is dead but them in a mansion somewhere on a hill. And they immediately start going, well, who's going to wash their clothes? Who's going to mow the lawn? I'm just like, not the whole world, genius. Just 99.9%. I mean, there's a lot of people on the planet, okay? So 1% is a whole hell of a lot of people. The prophet system is used to give you also, I believe, perhaps a false impression of how the gods work in this universe. And I say gods plural because there's a lot of people with a lot of different beliefs out there. I think a lot of people just, if they believe in any god, they believe in one God. It may not be the one that you have the same name for. Some people believe if they kill their enemy and themselves at the same time, that there's 40 virgins waiting for them. Some people think if you just die for what is right, then at least your scorecard when you get to the other side will be good. I've mentioned that several times on the show. Sometimes you get in these scenarios in your brain where you feel like you're going to be backed into a corner. Someone's at your doorstep. They're going to extract you from your home. They're going to change your life with a piece of, some piece of experimental stuff that's going to go inside your body. And if you understand it properly, you don't want to let them kill you. And so you're willing to go to the maximum extreme to defend yourself. And again, if you're not in a country that has any real ability to do so, oh my God. I mean, you're just waiting for someone to knock on your door. It's terrifying, isn't it? The thing is every single paradigm of existence that we adopt that is geared towards helping us deal with our situation, that is not properly framed. Now, I'm going to get into what I mean by that in a second here. It could put you at jeopardy of doing anything of your own to improve your life or protect yourself or make the proper changes to put yourself in a better position in life. But what do I mean by framing? I will always believe there's a God. I will. Now, a friend of mine had a real interesting experience, which I'll get to after this. It's kind of on point. But some people wait for signs. You know that whole thing, that people wait for signs. And there's another passage somewhere in the Bible that talks about, you're not testing God. Don't test God, because that could be a little habit of yours. If God responded one time to one of your tests, something benign, Then you're going to go back for more and go back for more. And if he doesn't show up the second, third, 10th, 20th time, you're going to start losing your faith with God. Maybe. We like UFOs because they're going to come down and save us. We like the second coming because it'll be Jesus coming down and saving us. Believe me, I do welcome the second coming as it has been documented by most texts. I might even, get a few lumps on my head in the process, but I'm ready to be held accountable for my behavior. I know what I've done that could be in that realm, but I've been living, 99.9% of my life for good. And it's only my primitive nature that has helped me, it allowed me to slip into these 1 in a million situations, which did happen, But according to my buddy, who I love dearly, he said to me, he goes, I had a weird confirmation experience. Now, again, he is religious, but he's also sort of super cynical about these sort of things. So when he tells me this story, it landed with me pretty good. And he was in a really good spot the other day. He's definitely middle-aged, mid-50s. And he's done all these amazing things in his life. I mean, tremendous successes in life. He was a rock star for a while. Still plays music. He has his own music store. He's had great jobs. He's been celebrated. But now he's getting the age discrimination thing that everyone gets. He's got money. And he said, over the last, I guess this might have been like a couple weeks ago, he said, I was praying to God all the time. And I said, God, I really need you to send someone to pray for me because I really need that right now. Now, for me, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Sounds obvious, but maybe it means something else, but that's irrelevant. So he's praying and praying and praying, and he just turned this regimen on, and it went about 7 days. And he and his brother, who have been singing at churches, he was in a gospel R&B band, very successful. I mean, lots of albums, was very successful in that realm. He and his brother created this church, or a bunch of people kind of came together when the COOF was out there and you couldn't go to the formal institutions unless you have agents of Satan, try to arrest you for doing so. So they all went to this backyard and they've just created this really beautiful thing, and now it's going. It's just going. So that format was really good for his girlfriend, who was somewhat religious, but sort of hadn't found the right place to worship. So he's bringing her, which is a big success for him. And there was a widow, this older woman whose husband had passed about 3 months ago. And she goes too. And she's enjoying herself. And he said after about a week had passed praying to God about this, he said that he's walking out of the church. And she's beelining for him. Now, he sees her once a week, minimum, right? But she's beelining for him, and he's looking at her, and they always hug each other and that kind of thing. And she said to him something like, I've really, he says, why I really got to talk to you about something. I got to tell you something. And it was something like, do you know why? And he said, well, I just thought it's because I'm so attractive, so handsome or something. And she was going to be really serious. And so she blew that off. And then she said, look, I just want you to know, since last Sunday, I heard God's voice, and he told me to pray for you specifically, that you were lost. And it was one of these correlations between the words that he had used to pray to God, just according to him. And again, he's not a tall tale guy, quite the opposite. He's probably twice the opposite of myself. The exact same words he sent to God. Remember the database query thing I always talk about when you send a query to the universe? The better it is, the better results you get back. She said the exact same words back to him, and she told him, I've been praying you for the last week. And his mind just blows. He's just like, really? Because I did ask God exactly a week ago for this to occur, and it must have been literally within minutes you got the same message. And thank you so much, because you are one of the most angelic people to have ever taken on that task for him, And so that's real magic, in my opinion. That's the real deal. He didn't need to open his book and cite anything in the book and call out a prophet to get that saying, get this literally may never happen again in his entire life moment, which I'm sitting there looking at him. We're upstairs at the lounge, and I'm like, I said, well, you just got confirmation of God, didn't you? There's no more ever in your life doubting the fact that God exists and that you have a communication with him and that this streams back to the universe. Now, someone could technically say, well, he sent it to the old lady. Thing is he wasn't thinking about her at all. She just got the message. So either human beings are utterly phenomenal and she's just dialed in to people at the church and she did just grab it out of the ether, or there is a central hub known as the God. You know, I'm going to propose a fundamental question, which I think is very powerful for undoing what the question presents, which is the following. Let's just say you go up and you meet God, however that works. And you ask to look in his book of physics, his book of how many rules and things that God does to keep the whole place going. Do you think you're going to see an Einstein, blackboard with the crazy algorithm going down to E equals MC squared? Or do you think you're going to see like E equals MC squared? Do you think you're going to see that little thing down there, even though he didn't invent that at all? I'm thinking that it's probably going to be something really fundamental and strange. He's going to say, I'll give you like a funny Hollywood example, but you ask God, can I see, your book of science and what it is, what algorithm you have or algorithms you have to keep the universe together? And God says, oh yeah, sure. He reaches in his pocket and he pulls out a rose petal and just shows it to you, right? It's this pink rose petal. Here, that's what I use to run the universe. And your mind just goes poof, And it could be just this beautiful thing that within that rose petal is the Fibonacci pattern, the golden mean of life. And that is the one algorithm that makes it all happen, makes all fractals exist, distributes all ether into the universe. Perhaps our souls also dance in the same algorithm. I think magic is all around us and it's right under our nose. But we get lost, don't we? We get lost in this chaos of life, even if there weren't crazy shit going on. Let's just say the whole world's great. And your path in life is fairly secured or is totally secured. But because you're a snowflake, you are a unique thing. You can get to the point where you've exhausted all that is available for that brief moment in time. 5 minutes from now, you're going to be back into it again and booming. But for that brief moment in time, you lose track of your thoughts and things seem a little like scatterbrained. And that's where I think religious texts of all kinds and philosophical texts of all kinds can be very handy, because it is sort of like the algorithmic training wheels to your mind. Let's just say you own that little book called The Prophet. I own a couple copies. It's the tiniest little book in the world. And it's just full of like Hindu beauty. And nothing contradicts anything that is any other text. It's just beautiful, beautiful wisdom about the self and about relationships. And you just start reading it. You could probably read it in 45 minutes if you were talking in between reading a page. It's teeny tiny. There's almost no writing in the whole thing. And it just starts to get you to think clearly, because processing linear phonetics organizes the charges inside your mind. And because your mind is this apparition between your soul and your body, it all resonates back up through your third eye. And I would wager, okay, since your soul is this perfect version of you, it's not perfect in that it has all knowledge. It's just perfect that maybe it has access to all knowledge, but it just operates in pure truth. It can't be blasphemous in any way, shape, or form. And we are in a performance right now through the human body. And reading something beautiful has been vetted by tens of millions, if not hundreds, if not billions of people as being a scripture of useful thought. It can get you back on track. It's going to come back and resonate with who you are as a person, not who I am, not who the author was. And just like I say on this show, if I ever say anything that offends you, the beauty of it is that I've gotten you to confirm your own beliefs. That's value. Profits can be made as long as someone says something very generic and someone else at any future in time picks up on that, records the chain of events that has been prophesized, and they have the power to convince you that those chain of events have actually taken place. Now, celestial bodies moving, well, that just has to do with a cyclical thing that they are aware of. Or, in the case of unified currencies, they just make it happen. They just make it happen. It's a clear, concise, easy objective. Whether or not it's easy to do is a different thing. Seems to be pretty good so far, right? It's all going digital. They want everything trackable. Trackable means controllable. It's funny, in 1997, they released that little video on the internet where it was this mock phone call with a Domino's pizza. And the guy's trying to order Domino's pizza. And whoever did this, it could have been them, just doing predictive programming. It's really well acted out, but this guy's trying to order the pizza and she's looking up his HIPAA records, his health records, and she says, "You're a diabetic. You can't order the large pizza. You can't get these ingredients on the pizza." And I think it went on and on. They had penalties for using his money, and it was an example of the future that was coming. And because we know of Event 201, where they were predicting the COOF just a month before it drops on the world, they create these videos. They create them and they play them at these presentations to show the people who think they're going to be in control, or the first people to be slaughtered because they're the traitors. They show it to them and they say, "Was that something we think we can get done? You see where we're going?" "Oh, yeah, totally. Oh, yeah, great. Well, the second we get it, your neck's coming untied, okay?" The power is in you. That's the trick. That's the secret. The power is inside you. And, I'm gonna digress just a tad to prove that point in a esoteric way, okay? I drop this every once in a while, but we're going to spend about 5 minutes on it and we'll shut the show down. I made a comment in one of my last videos. I think it was the vacuum of power episode, I believe. Could have been the Chaos Report. Anyway, I said, what if the only reason why I look in the mirror and see myself as I see myself is because my parents projected onto me my first look and feel. Why do I look like my parents? Well, obviously there's a DNA protein pattern, clear excuse for that. But if we're in a consensus reality, they're going to project an even component onto from both of them to me. And so I'm a perfect mix between my parents. It's crazy how much I might just see my father in my face, and then the second I see my whole mom's family in my face. It's just interesting. But I then have that sort of schematic installed. It's almost like someone giving me a mask and say, "Wear this," okay? And you can modify the mask, but you can't make a brand new mask. And so I age into the mask. I age into that view of myself. When you see me, you see what you see my image of myself. You don't see, because you didn't have any opinion of me before you saw me. Even the camera itself simply is recording the vibrations that I'm sending to the camera, giving it my image. This perception reality model is extremely interesting when you take it to the next step and the next step. It'd be a great sci-fi thing, right? There was the Twilight Zone where the guy could control what he looked like, but he had to look at someone and steal the way they looked. The problem is he only was able to steal the way that they looked. And he happened to steal the image of a guy whose father wanted to kill him. And that didn't work out for him. Plus he wasn't smart enough to deal with the fallout with his father. But taking that to an extreme, the one thing I've never done is taken it over the fence of causality. What if your belief in the cause and effect models of the universe are also proprietary to what you have absorbed out of this reality? You do this, the equal opposite reaction is simply what you studied. I mean, think about it. If you went into a college scientific laboratory of any kind, a quantum physics laboratory where they're going to show you the slit light experiment, they're going to show you a laser bay, something else. You're probably not going to walk in the room with any context of what you're going to see. It's so much more complex than what you could have predicted before you walk in the door. So what happens? You keep your mouth shut and you watch and you learn and you're excited to do so. But in that act, technically speaking, if it was being projected into your mind from an absolute zero, a void, you're allowing that to occur because that's the process we built up on planet Earth. And isn't it interesting that when you quiet your soul, when you quiet your thinking, and you just obtusely send a question to God and you say, God, this is obviously occurring in my life, whatever question you might be asking, right? And you say, how does this work, How did those pyramids get built? Without anyone scribing down any mathematics on any tablet, on any hieroglyph, how did that knowledge get passed around such that all these things could be built? And forget how they build them. Doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if you poured the rocks into place or you cut them and moved them into place. It doesn't matter. The overall structure itself is a profound accomplishment in discovering the mathematics of the universe and then being able to harness them in stone form. Well, we can get answers from the universe, in my opinion, if you can conceive of the answer. And not from a point of creating the answer out of thin air that is untrue. But if I said, okay, you're asking me how money got completely co-opted into these people's hands, but you can conceive of pretty much all of the accounting and banking and a piece of paper and a rock being called valuable, right? A rock of diamond or a bar of gold. If you can conceive of those fundamental pieces, those fundamental Legos that build a space station, as I said recently, and I give you the answer because you understand. It's just like saying you're on Wheel of Fortune. No one can solve a puzzle on Wheel of Fortune unless they already knew the phrase. Or if in the remaining letters that are missing, that's pretty obvious using their mind and previous chatter in their life, they've heard that last word is car or basket or whatever it is. But if they had never, ever heard the word before and couldn't conceive it, they could never solve a puzzle on Wheel of Fortune. So perhaps one of the reasons why I'm having a hell of a time parsing these pyramids is because the answer has components that I can't conceive of as of yet. I'm willing to believe that the answers are probably very primitive. And so one of the catches and gotchas in life is overthinking things and overcomplicating things. It's like all those little puzzles in life, those physical puzzles they used to have big in the 70s, of a piece of wood and some spirally weird metal braces and stuff, and they'd have a big ass pinball in there somewhere. And you had to get the pinball on the other side of this thing. There's a Japanese one with a little rope that's involved too. And the rope sort of blocks the movement of the ball, but there's a way to get it on the other side. You just got to figure it out. Well, the person who knows the answer knows it's really simple. And they know that you can't solve it because you're overthinking the solution. Probably in the last 10, 15 years, someone had one of those things. And I remember it was like there's a bunch of people in a room and they were doing something else and that thing was in there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for it, right? And I'm looking at this thing and I felt myself overcomplicating the answer. And so I just kept saying, reset, go back to zero. This is like a 2-move thing. This is like something fundamentally, completely simple. It took me a while, but all of a sudden, pow, it happened. And I was like, whoa. And what's really strange about solving problems is that God put inside a human body this endorphin rush when that occurs. As if to say, I want you to get good at doing this. Not this thing, but solving problems. Figuring out things, deducing things. A friend of mine just asked me recently, last night in a phone call, she said, sometimes I wonder, what am I doing on this planet? What am I doing here? I'm watching the world act like a bunch of idiots, and I don't need that. I don't need to know what stupid people do. There's an infinite supply of things that stupid people could do. Why do I have to be here? And she was mentioning the prophets. It's really funny. She is not necessarily, she's definitely not a Christian. She's religious in different things. But she was, she's Jewish, and she was talking about Revelations and just kind of going, man, maybe this stuff is all going to happen. This just seems so chaotic and so pointless that God himself would look down and go, there's nothing useful going on earth. I mean, there's an interpretation that can get to that point. But what if, there is a singular journey that's really going on? We need each other to be healthy. This is true. We need to physically see each other to be healthy. This online shit is just designed to rot your soul. It's the truth, man. If you turn off all that social media and restrict yourself from other methods of satisfying yourself outside of human beings, and you're going to have to go get it. And once you go get it, it's going to be 1,000, 1,000,000 times more than anything you could have constructed by yourself in those social cases, But let's take that little example I just gave you, playing with the little Japanese toy thing. She's asking a very fundamental question. Why are we here? Why are we here? Why are we going through all this crap? Why do we have to watch our countries, all of them, go down the tubes within just days of having existed, if you really look at the overall spread of time? Maybe the answer is super simple. There is a lesson for those of us who are lucid to take to the next incarnation. My buddy was coming to me and he was talking about reincarnation because, he's terrified of reincarnation. And he's terrified not because of coming back, but he's terrified that his book isn't right. And reincarnation is something that would make him question even further than what he's already questioning quietly to himself, exhibitioning through prophet sighting. Now, if you're in your 20s, and I just had a comment from someone who I believe is in his 20s, which is so warming that we have a younger audience out there too. I sure hope this show gets you to skip a lot of the problems I had in life by telling you about my problems. You're going to have to watch a lot of episodes, but nevertheless, when you get to 50, you realize that you're going to live the shortest flash in the pants life that any being could live. I mean, it is so quick. It's ridiculous. 30 years from now, I'm going to be 82 years old. 30 years from now, man. And hell, even if I'm William Shatner and I'm still a boss at 82, how many more years do I have? My Clint Eastwood, how many years do I got left? 18 tops, right? 100 years old. I'm going to tell you, it's a flash in the pants, this life. The algorithmic assumption that God would limit you to this utter, microscopic, infinitely small existence as opposed to the infinite existence in heaven, whatever that is, it just hurts the brain to think that it would be so short-sighted. I've had amazing trips on acid, okay? Closing my eyes and seeing all this crazy artwork that I later drew. And as much as that was just incredible for at least 2 hours, and then one of my sessions, my first session, man, there was a sweet spot in there, 2 or 3 hours. Oh my God, it was amazing. And people did heroin, they chased the dragon, all that stuff. And it doesn't matter how great those moments are. Coming back down to a lucid reality, nice with acid, you don't need withdrawals of any kind. You do want to come back and then use the tools you found in dreamland in the real world. So you like restrictions, trust me. And every time it happens in a movie where you've got restrictions holding the characters back and all of a sudden a god shows up and saves everybody, that's Deus Ex Machina. That's what was frowned upon back in the day. It was expected in the Greek theater days, but if you were to watch a movie today and it's Luke Skywalker and he's in the middle of this incredible situation and there's a million logical ways he could get out of it, but suddenly Obi-Wan Kenobi reincarnates next to him and kills all the monsters and then robs Luke from getting his true comedy ending, which is the hero overcoming their obstacle. You'd be pissed. You'd be like, hey, make Obi have his own show, Or maybe he just says, Luke, pull up your underwear, something. I think we come back. I think it makes sense. I mean, I could see us coming back a million times as human beings. Maybe we go off and do something else. Maybe we're a ketchup bottle. Maybe we're a traffic light. Maybe we're just a photon coming off the wave of light. Who knows? Doesn't matter. There's lessons to be learned. And the other thing, too, is that you have to understand, man, even though what we're going through right now is unprecedented and weird as hell, from 1918 to 1922, this was happening to them. Again, it didn't get really dismissed worldwide until 1923. And there was no internet to go research things and find out whether or not it made any sense. People were just scared. And so we've been through this before. We've been through crazy situations. I mean, Americans, I'm sure several of your other countries went through this, but we're in World War II. I mean, it was like aluminum pots and pans and what was it? The ladies' pantyhose were all donated to the military. Copper was donated. I mean, everything was sent to the military to grind down to make things for the war. Housewives went from raising their kids to building B-2 bombers, or B-52 bombers, right? Sorry, not B-2 bombers. That would have been cool. We get through these moments. We really do. We're just afraid that there definitely is definitive information online that this is one of their big changes to the world. And now they have technology and media to convince people to cut their own throats, If there is a God, then nothing's going to stop God from being with you. And nothing's going to stop God from picking you up if you happen to cross over. I truly believe that. And, would you really, want someone to sit down with you and say, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to tell you all about heaven. I'm going to tell you exactly what it looks like. And I'm going to tell you, how to cut in line, past Peter's book and get yourself up a little faster. And I'm going to teach you. When you go through the door, there's the restroom over to the right. And there's the best donut place on planet right there. Nah, you don't want that. You want the whole journey to be a surprise. Be surprised. Me telling you what heaven is like, or anyone else attempting to tell you what heaven like, it's pretty much, in my opinion, like Christmas morning. You're 5 years old. You believe Santa Claus exists. You got a bunch of package under a tree. And I just sit there and tell you everything that's in every package before you open it. Oh, you're going to do that one? Oh, that's your Hot Wheels set. Oh, that's your was it Mattel plane set with Weeble Wobbles. You'd be so pissed. But somehow, adults get all insecure. They want to know the future. They want to know what heaven's like. Not just to be amazing. You can't die. You can't. I think that's something that will be a big epiphany, and it will be probably very soothing. Just the whole concept, talk about the words that you can't conceive. When you turn back into your light form, the idea of death is not going to be something that is in your nomenclature anymore. It'll go away instantaneously. The second that you realize that your body passed and you're floating somewhere, hopefully wonderful, painlessly, you'll be like, oh man, it's real. It's real. This is a trip. I'm going into dreamland. And even if I'm floating up into what is supposed to be bone-chilling atmosphere, I don't feel anything. I feel good. It makes me wonder why some people who've done the near-death experience, they all talk about having seen their body when they pass away. Lots of people have had that experience, not just rock stars on heroin. And this is an old story. I mean, this is really an old story. I think you get back to the 1800s, and I think you get to the point where you're not supposed to say this kind of stuff because there's just all this predetermined stuff of what you're supposed to experience. You're supposed to go into the earth. My friend was so adamant that he thought we went into the ground and that we're held there until the second coming, which is the classic interpretation. But he really sat for 30 minutes, citing a couple passages in the Bible where people came out of the ground and were angry they were awakened. He says, because of these two passages, I believe we're in the ground. We're in the ground. We're in the ground. We're in the ground. I said, well, whatever happens to cremated people who are thrown down the river? Well, it's still ashes and you still go in the ground. It was like worried about those moments. You're your soul, so don't worry about your body. I mean, take care of it. You're here. You're going to have a better experience the more you're more mobile, the more lucid you are. For people that are suffering mental conditions, the vessel / the computer has got problems, man. You poured some people pour the coffee right into the front grill. Yeah, there was a bunch of sparks that flew out of the thing, and even if you let it dry off, it ain't going to run like it used to. Can you blame the electricity? No, you're just blaming the circuits that don't work anymore, We're all going to be okay. I'll tell you that much. Try to find the magic that's right under your nose and don't worry about people predicting things. I mean, you can totally have fun with that stuff, in my opinion, and maybe it's more like the more prophecy that you study, the more that you're going to be hip to what the ruling class has potentially planned for your future. That's a good use of your time if you're really into that kind of thing. But I want you to see it as a very mortal, man-made thing, man-made passages that were only recently scribed for us to read, and then just simply used as a playbook against us at times, whether it be to make us feel euphoric or to make us feel scared. And just remember, 1947 was the year that not only they dug up the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they dug up the scrolls of the Anunnaki in Egypt. So it was a battle of the scrolls. And a friend of mine just educated me a little bit on sort of the backstory, the spin of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is that a group of people thought that perhaps those ancient stories were going to get overwritten by the Romans, and so they buried them away to make sure that they weren't lost in time, There still could be a lot of truth to that, but the information written down on those things is most likely allegory of man. So, if you read anything that makes you alarmed, make sure you're at least attaching it to reality. That's my opinion. That's my advice. But I'd be interested in your sort of take in this area, because some of you are really into this kind of thing. Did you ever get into it and get out of it? Did you ever come to the same conclusion that I just came to? Do you think that there's reason to have more belief in these things that I didn't mention? Anyway. If you have been to deepthoughtsradio.com, make sure to bookmark that just in case January 5th next year, we're having the new complete undocumented changes in the community policies come into effect. We know this is probably another brace to clean out the tomes of knowledge that are online. Now, you have to understand we're on more independent video channels than we are on the one official one, right? The podcast is drawn straight from the website, so you don't even need any help getting the podcast, but it is on the Google one, it's on Apple, and a bunch of people scraped it into their own channels. Again, we have a South American group of people coming online, which I think was responsible for a big surge in subs. Now, once we crossed 5,000, it just has hovered at 5,005. It does not go up or down. So, in a short span, we got 60, and now we're just like hovering in there. Oh, and what's interesting is when you look at the statistics from my end, the little line graph that they show you on how many subs you have, up until this last season, it was very organic, huge spikes up and down when I did a particular episode that was really popular. And then right at season 6, okay, it wiggles up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, the statistical likelihood of that is 0, okay? The reason why it's a sawtooth curve now is because of censorship, right, and shadow banning. So it organically goes up, they smack it down. It organically goes up, they smack it down. This is how we have this sawtooth thing. So if there's ever any litigation that's successful in that realm, we've got the proof now. I keep screen capturing all of it. It's just brilliant. So only you can start forest fires. Let me just say that much. But yeah, we've got the video, the audio, all the social media. Again, more independent social media places than the official ones. We got a all-new remastered Season 1 with better mic. And so some of the videos are like 10 minutes shorter from the originals. We've got a store with some cool shirts and stuff. People have been grabbing those. And we've had a spike in PayPal and Patreon, folks. So for all those who are joining, thank you so much. I'm going to have to start sticking your names in the end here. Appreciate you very much and make the show happen. Just remember, you get the episodes probably about 12 hours before everyone else, minimum. Sometimes you get it for 2 or 3 days beforehand. And I make fireside chats for you folks. And after you hit a certain threshold, we can do FaceTime together. I've met a bunch of the Patreons, and every single one of them are just amazing. So I appreciate all of you. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.